Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Julie Johnson. I am here from Rutgers University, continuing in professional studies. We welcome you to a great afternoon of conversation with David Lipsey and Andrew Hall, who I'm going to turn this whole event over. I don't want to steal any moments of their time together. So welcome. And David.
Julie, thanks so much. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is David Lipsey. I am the academic director of our programs at Rutgers, our professional programs in digital asset management and advanced creative operations. Julie and I are always looking to both understand how we can better accelerate professional development and what that means for the careers and the lives of professionals working in our organizations devoted to this kind of work or learning to join our professions. As part of doing that, we have our certificate granting programs at Rutgers. In addition, we love to organize colloquiums where we get to learn and somebody else gets to talk. In the spirit of that today, we've asked a friend of ours and a renowned leader in many aspects of agency and digital asset operations, Andrew Hall, to join us. Andrew's going to take us through an interesting presentation about the connected agency. And I think the connected world is so much of what underlies what we teach at Rutgers. We're always asking the question of what's next. And in our colloquium, in Andrew's or colloquia, and in Andrew's presentation today, we look at some specific ideas about what's next as the enablement of data to bring us connected to our work, to bettering our missions and our goals, whether we're in the profit-making or not-for-profit world, are something that we're continually focusing on. How do we do better? And how do we do that consistently? And how someone who helps me talk about those conversations is here to join us. Andrew, over to you. Please enter any questions in the proverbial Zoom Q&A panel, and we'll be back to review some of those after Andrew completes his presentation. Andrew, thanks for joining us today.
David, thank you for having me. David and Julie, thank you for having me. I'm truly honored, also a little bit anxious about my first colloquium, and I really hope that everyone enjoys it. I'm going to share my screen so I can get the presentation up and double check everyone can see that. I think they can, which is great. And make sure that I'm set up ready to rock and roll. So I'm going to give you an introduction to myself in a second. David and Julie asked me to talk around my experience in the agency world. And I do need to kind of be clear that I'm couching this whole presentation on my experiences and the learnings I've had both in my agency time as well as time in the MarTech world. I've come to believe that agency experiences are very similar across the world. But as David said, please ask questions, and I'd love this to be an engaging time together as I give you my thoughts and thinking around what it means to be a connected agency and what innovations do I believe modern agencies need to put in place to create success, especially amidst this new era of AI and what that's doing and the potential of uniformity. And as the presentation unfolds, I hope that the headline becomes more clear and what we're talking about. So let's dive in. I'm Andrew Hall. As David said, I'm the VP of Global Demand Generation at Canto. I'm very lucky to work in the MarTech world. But before that, I spent 15 years in agency. It was a very, very formative time in my career and life. And I learned so many great things. I have a few scars left from the agency world. But I often say, and I often do, I look to hire agency people or ex-agency people because of how brilliant agency individuals are: resilience, creativity, thoughtfulness, competitiveness. The agency world was an incredible time for me where I learned a lot. I started as an account manager, so as we called it back then, I was a suit, mostly because I wore a suit versus the creators who did the actual creative work. But we had an incredible relationship between the kind of account side of the organization and the creative side. I went on to lead the same organization that I joined and became the CEO or managing director of a group of agencies. When I started back as a fairly young 24-year-old, we were 20 people. And by the time I left, or made the decision to leave, we were 350 people across a independent group of agencies of 5 different organizations. And really, my story is based and couched in the experiences I had from, I suppose, in many ways, a disconnected agency that worked incredibly hard to win pitches, to a connected agency that understood operational resilience, the power of data, and the ability, dare I say it, to go head to head with procurement. And so that was the background to my agency world, and I hope gives me some credibility in this conversation around both empathizing and giving you my ideas around where the modern agency looks. What I'm almost more lucky about is the second chapter of my career was in marketing technology, and today I get to serve over 4,000 customers in digital asset management. Digital asset management formed a very formative part of my digital resilience program in the connected agency space I worked in. And what I love about demand gen, if any of you know what that is I sit in the commercial world of marketing, which is very much about data, it's about numbers, it's about presenting back to the board on how we're doing against the budget they gave me, etc. And so I'm immersed often in spreadsheets and data. But what a lot of people don't realize is that without really good creative, good headlines that actually are relevant, that are delivered to the right individual at the right time, without all of that, demand generation never takes off. And so you could be the best number cruncher and the best data analyst and be able to, really put together incredible spreadsheets, which I think I have some skills there. I'm pretty good, but without the fundamentals of creativity, none of that is ever going to take off. And so I always couch a lot of what I do in the power of creativity. And I hope that as I deliver this presentation, you'll realize the passion I have and the respect I have for the creative process and the incredible role that creative plays within businesses around the world. And so as we venture into today's headline, please remember that I believe that agencies who want to thrive in a modern world and that would like to scale need to be able to protect the creative product. And to do that, you need a certain level of technology and operational structure to be able to go ahead. So that's the introduction. We have a fair amount of slides to start with. I do have a bit of fun to get going, and I do like doing engaging things to pull you all in. And so I've got 2 very quick polls that I'm going to ask Julie to please facilitate. I don't know yet whether I can see these. And so, Julie, if you can get the first poll going around the different roles that all of you play inside the agency space, I do like to see that.
Yes, so currently we have 62% are other. Then we have 15% who are part of the creative team, 12% who are project traffic managers, 8% who are account managers, directors, and 4% are CEOs.
Okay, cool. That's a pretty good mix. I might have done badly on picking the others, so I do apologize that I might have missed it, but that gives me what I need. And then I will give some relevance to that in a second. Julie, if we can do poll number 2, that would be pretty awesome. And then I can give some context to it.
Okay, here we go. People are voting.
Tell me when you have a few numbers, Julie. I don't unfortunately see them.
We're at 58% are between 1 and 50. 15% are between 51 and 100. 4% are between 101 to 250. 11% are between 251 and 500. And then another 11% are 500 and above.
Okay, awesome. Love that. Brilliant. Okay, that's exactly what I need. So let me start off. First of all, traffic managers, to all of you listening, I think you do the most amazing job. I don't know how you do it, and I'm not entirely sure you could pay me enough to do the job that you do. And I hope the presentation resonates. The creative world, a lot of what I talk about is how do we protect the creative product. We're going to talk a little bit about AI later, the benefits and challenges, and where creative sits inside there. From a CEO perspective, I'd love your thoughts and comments. I went from pitching and engaging with clients and doing lovely engagement to sitting inside procurement offices, discussing the merits of our retainer and whether we are getting paid enough. And then on the account management side, I started where you are. I loved it. It's super exciting. And I always wanted to be in the creative studio, although my creative director never let me be there. Whoever was in the other, I apologize if I missed your area, but I just wanted to give some kind of, I love the idea of what we have here because I can tailor some of the thoughts a bit later to certain areas. The biggest one for me is that the reason why I ask for size of agencies is that I believe there are inflection points when agencies hit certain numbers where decisions need to be made on how you're going to invest and implement technology. I spent many of my years between 1 and 50. Again, obviously, there can be some, slight difference between whether it's 40, 50, or 60. But I believe at 50, there's a certain level of operational structure that needs to be put in place for you to keep on scaling and protect the bottom line of the organization. Same thing at 100. I never got to past 500. And so I think I'm pretty well versed in what that looks like, but I never actually got to past 500. I spent 7 years within the 250 and 500 around 350. And all those different size agencies require slightly different strategies to be able to ensure that you don't just grow top line, that you actually ensure that there's a net profitability that stays healthy, something that I didn't get quite correct, and it creates an incredible burden and strain on the organization. But thank you for that. That was really good. It allows me to be a little bit more relevant as we go through the presentation deck. So I have told, this is the fun icebreaker, and it's a 5-minute video. So strap in and get the popcorn out and have a listen and a watch of this. I'm wondering if any of you have seen this, and drop it in the chat if you have. It's a YouTube clip that's quite old now, but it was called Redesigning the Stop Sign. And I only had the courage to show this to one of my customers, one of my clients. And to this day, I still don't know if it went down okay, but it's so close to the bone. It's very funny. It has a good laugh. And then I'll have kind of more serious chat about it afterwards. But I love this video for what it represents around the challenges that us as marketers, but more importantly, creatives, go through every day with agencies. And so the concept was, imagine if there were no stop signs and you were being briefed to create one. Right, and let's play.
So, we're seeing reports that people don't know what to do at an intersection.
Some people are slowing, others are accelerating, a small percentage are backing up, and the rest are crashing.
So we're looking for signage that makes people want to bring their vehicle to a standstill before they continue.
Essentially a sign that tells people to stop.
Essentially. If you look on page 16 of your brief, you'll notice that about 50% of HVMs are female.
Yeah, HVMs.
Home vehicle managers, but don't neglect the other 50% who are primarily male.
Okay, so we're
Sorry.
basically targeting all drivers?
No, we're targeting women, but we're also targeting men secondarily.
But really think this thing through if you could, okay? We're looking for stopping power. Yeah, I mean, and still get it by tomorrow.
I love where you've taken this. You guys nailed it.
Yeah, I think this is pretty spot on. Having said that, we're getting some additional details from upper management since the initial briefing we gave you. I think we have the opportunity to make this piece hit a little harder.
Yeah, harder.
The main message is still the stopping occasion, but we're also going to need to include personal safety cues, any appropriate right-of-way legal, and our partner logos.
And as far as red goes, we love it. But we got word from our creative standard group that the fire department kind of owns red, so we're gonna have to lighten it up on the Pantone scale.
Lighten it up like pink?
Based on our female target market, I don't see a downside.
Yeah, well, what about our male secondary market?
Maybe we do pink signs in the female intersection zones and blue ones in the male ones.
And which intersections are the female ones?
I got it. Why don't you go with pink and blue until we get you an answer on that?
Brilliant.
Way to crack the code. I think we're done here.
The only thing I can see is bumping that logo up just a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
We just got word from the UN that we can't use their logo.
Then let's bump up the EPA logo.
Okay.
I think somewhere on there we need to show the stopping occasion.
It needs to be telegraphic.
Yeah, some people just don't read, you know?
It's great. Can we try a new line? I showed it to my daughter and she didn't really get it.
Yeah, circles feel very 90s to me. Can we try a different shape, too?
Can we try a softer headline though?
And a web address, in case people want more info?
Maybe a burst that says new. If it doesn't make it too busy.
I keep imagining a line of cars stacked up at the intersection.
Yeah, I think we need a more complete call to action so people
People know exactly what to do after the pause.
I'd also like to see maybe some people smiling on it. You know, to remind drivers that stopping isn't required, it's also fun.
You guys got all that? Wow, I'd have to say I think you finally got it.
You guys did an amazing job of fitting all of our suggestions in on one sign.
Can you throw together a look of
Success for a sell-in meeting this afternoon?
And that's how it all comes together, guys. I mean, if I were at that intersection, I'd stop.
Me too.
I don't see how anyone couldn't. Let's get these things printed and out the door.
Guys, we're a little disappointed in how this thing is testing, so we've got some minor tweaks we're looking into.
So I hope you had a bit of a chuckle, but there's a more serious side to that, and every time I watch that, it brings back a lot of the challenges that I remember facing. And so I put together my own little word cloud of the more business-like and real challenges, that although that's fun and tongue-in-cheek and done in a very well kind of light-hearted way, there's a whole lot of more serious things that impact agencies that us as agency leaders, agency professionals will feel every day. You know, things like scope creep, things like creative burnout is a real thing. The briefing process, billable hours was a really big one for me around how do we make sure that we bill for time that's been wasted, whose responsibility is the delivery of that if the creative was watered down from the very beginning. You know, deadlines, you heard one of the clients go, you finally got it. You know, those are the type of things that as agencies we deal with every single day and start to creep into some of the things that impact a successful business, retaining top talent, all that type of good things. That is a far more serious side of that fun video. Please add in the comments if you've seen it, if it resonates, if it doesn't resonate, and if you have seen it, did you ever show one of your clients like I did? And I'm not entirely sure if the relationship went on to be stronger from there. Okay, so let's dive into the presentation. I've broken it into 3 sections. One is what I like to call context. What are we seeing out in the market? As I said, I am very lucky I get to work for a marketing technology company that's right on the forefront of, you know, content, creative content, where that is. I get to work with many of our customers. I also head up our agency special units. And so I get to engage with many agencies globally, most of those in the US, which is awesome. And so I thought it'd be good to add context to what we are seeing in 2025 and some of the challenges that we see our customers facing within the world of content. And so, you know, what is happening from an agency perspective, and this came from, these were 10 things that I pulled from research I did coming into this colloquium. It's interesting that so much stays the same, so much changes, yet so much change stays the same. 2 times, one is when I was running an agency, all of these, except for AI, was right up there with our challenges. The other one is when I first started at Cantor, I put together a agency playbook and said, these are the 10 challenges that agencies are facing, and most of them are still there, right? And so in no actual order, but the commoditization of creativity and innovation services is a big one. I've always felt that clients just don't understand how valuable creative is, the time that goes into it, the emotional time as well that's invested, and then how do agencies stand out in a very saturated market? There's multiple agencies popping up every single day. Another really big one, which we're seeing on the brand side as well, is tight budgets yet big ideas. And how many times do you guys hear, hey, well, budgets are tight, but we're looking for something really impactful? That's a difficult thing, to manage and balance when you've got creative teams that require salaries, bonuses, etc., and a time-based delivery. How are you measuring value and return on investment? Again, quite difficult to do. In some aspects, it's not that difficult, but in most aspects, concept creative strategy is difficult to pin on. How do you then cost against it? How do you grasp the opportunity of AI? I'm going to talk about that at length later. To be fair, that's a newer one that I didn't grapple with when I was in the agency space 8 years ago. Dealing with client demands. Again, I love my clients. Most of them, they pay the bills. I was very client-centric, but how do you make sure that you're standing up for yourself, right? How do you navigate budget constraints while meeting these elevated client expectations? The costly effects of indecision, both in the creative effect is also the money effect as well. This rise of content marketing is interesting for me, and again, probably something new from when I was an agency, but I'm seeing it hugely in my time at Cantor, and this explosion of influencers, content marketing, videos, etc. That's driven a lot of this content boom. True differentiation does speak to kind of standing out in a saturated market, but how do you differentiate yourselves? What's your value proposition, etc. The idea of client-facing data we'll speak to in a little bit. That covers all means, both on campaign level data, but also operational data. Client retention. How do you create stickiness with your clients? How do you invest time, effort, and money for them to only leave a year later where you probably haven't made the return you've got? If you've got long-term clients, that's a wonderful thing. I had many of them. How do you ensure that you're growing that you're keeping them, that they're happy, they're not looking elsewhere? And the last one I wanted to leave until the very end, but the retaining talent, the talent game inside agencies, for me, is a critical distinction between agencies that thrive and those that struggle, both on the creatives, in fact, across the whole organization. Creative's obvious, but across the agency, different job spec, retaining great talent is giving me the difference between great agencies and agencies that are kind of really pushing to try and get there. So those are the challenges. I'm sure you recognize most of them. If I've missed any, please put them in the chat. But those are difficult challenges for any agency to get through. The other interesting thing for me is this current content landscape. And again, we sit in the middle of content. We work with thousands of brands, we work with agencies as well, and we have seen this huge explosion of content requirements. It's interesting because all of us sat through COVID. We all, as marketers or agencies, saw this big need for content, and we all said, well, I'm pretty sure once we go back to normal, that's going to die down. Well, in fact, it didn't. It only increased. Generative AI came along, and that exploded things even further. And so we're seeing this like exacerbated content growth that's creating challenges to keep up, both on the agency side and on the brand side. And so it's interesting, there's 3 different resources that I've pulled in here. One is our own research, yearly research paper, where we interview 500 of our customers, of which 72% of those said they'll produce more content in 2025 than in 2024. Sounds obvious, but per my previous slide, it's interesting how that's growing. The biggest thing for them is with fewer resources, either budgets or headcount or both. And then the other one that comes from the Deloitte, the annual Deloitte digital research paper, is 85% of marketers say they're under pressure to create and deliver content more quickly. And so you've got this interesting trifecta of, I call it the trifecta of less headcount, at pace, and more content. That's a very difficult thing to balance, especially if you're trying to balance your bottom line as well. The other one that's interesting, which comes from the Adobe Research 2024, is 81% of marketers that they engaged with reported demand for content grew by 2 times in the last 2 years, with an expectation, say, that it might grow between 5 and 20 times over the next 2 years. As agencies, I'll be licking my lips or rubbing my hands and going, that's exciting. That means more work for us. But how do you accommodate that without breaking infrastructure and damaging bottom line? So think about that concept of not only growing top line revenue, but protecting your net profitability as well. Something that requires some deft handling. And so we use the term content chaos. And I'm sure the word chaos would resonate. Agencies run at a very quick pace. It's sometimes turned to chaos. Chaos is costly and can be challenging in many ways. And so we define content chaos as holding, well, we see content chaos holding teams back. We see scattered assets, siloed teams, and disconnected tools leading to missed deadlines, wasted time, and lost opportunities. Creativity is one of the biggest sufferers as a result of this world of content chaos. And I need to be clear that content chaos isn't created by agencies alone. In fact, far from it. It's often created by the interaction between disorganized clients or brands who fairly or need to get to market quickly because their boards change direction, and all of a sudden the agency is impacted to deliver something that's hugely creative, that's going to go and be measured against success, but needs to be done yesterday. How many times have you heard that thought? So to kind of end section 1 around context, we are seeing a lot of pressure on budgets. We're seeing a lot of pressure on time, and we're seeing a huge need for more content that in your world would spell campaigns and creative output. And so what does that mean? So I haven't painted a bleak picture. I painted a fairly challenging picture that I'm sure all of you grapple with in different ways in your different roles. But what does that mean from a solution perspective? What does it mean for me? And I will say here, some of this is research. A lot of it is my interpretation of what I believe is required. And a lot of it's my experience, both in the agency world as well as the MarTech world as well. And so to kick off, as I said to you earlier, I'm a huge believer in the power of creative thinking and creativity. And according to the McKinsey research paper of 2024 that I found, there's a direct link between an organization's financial performance and its penchant for creativity. Underscore here that your ability to do creative work for an organization can be the defining factor on their performance on the stock exchange, their share performance, whatever it is. But you do a job that organizations can't because they're not built like agencies. And therefore, I believe agencies are one of the most critical factors to define organizations' success. And your partnership with these brands is critical to both their success and yours. If any of you know, I'm based in the UK, although I have a South African accent. But if any of you do know any kind of classic British comedy, John Cleese is a legend of the 60s or 70s, I think it was. But if you want creative workers, give them enough time to play. And I love that, and it's the basis of everything I'm going to talk about. If you want creativity to thrive, you have to be able to create the time and space for creativity to live in. Creativity doesn't live in chaos. It doesn't live in speedy briefs and speedy delivery. True cut-through creative is when your organization can afford to spend the time to do the creative work required and the creative legwork. And to kind of throw this back to 2015, when I was at the helm of the group of agencies, I used to show my clients, there was an IBM research report of 2010, actually, where the top 500 organizations globally were interviewed, and 75% of the CEOs of these organizations chose creativity as the #1 tool to solve complex business problems back in 2010. Now, I believe the world has become more complicated and more complex, and therefore there's only a bigger need for creative thinking to deliver against these complex challenges that we face in our day-to-day lives. So if I look at that, I talk to operational resilience. So how do we create the space? How do we play sounds frivolous, but let's use the word. How do we create the space for creators to be playful and mindful and thinking and design thinking processes to be able to deliver? I believe that organizations, agency organizations, need to create a level of operational resilience that allows for this to happen. And so, what does that mean? Creating the time and space to creative requires operational resilience. I believe this is the basic digital infrastructure put in place to enable agencies to scale, for them to be connected. I spoke earlier about this idea of inflection points at 50, 100, 200, 500, and 1,000. I played, as I told you, between 50 and 350. And each time we passed those milestones, so we relooked the infrastructure we had digitally, and did it serve the purpose we had. When you have operational resilience, importantly, you get data on how the business is running. Anecdotally, I remember when our investors came in and they said, Andrew, what are the profit centers of your organization? Is it the copy team? Is it your development team? And I was like, wow, I have no idea. I can show you the profitability of the organization as a whole. And they said, no. That's not going to help us. We need to know how to staff everything. And I was like, wow, that's a really good insight. How do we make sure that each department within the organization is running effectively? Well, you can't do that without data, and you can't get the data without the tools to be able to do that. Information for things like billing purposes was a really big one for us. When we moved from 50 to 100 people, we went from a blended hourly rate to a structured hourly rate. We suddenly realized that we can't be charging out our executive creative director at the same rate as one of our junior consultants. It's equally damaging for the time spent with a high resource as it was to try and charge out the lower resource at a higher rate. And so without the data, we couldn't do that and start to kind of level off the challenge we had. And then again, I also believe this allows for consultant level operational engagement. And what I mean by that is, as we grew and got bigger and more successful, I say that in inverted commas, so we started to come up against the big consulting firms who were brilliant at the beginning, fantastic at quoting. They looked incredibly well put together. They were operationally excellent, better than us, but their creativity was awful. And so it always used to be one of the banes of my life that we potentially lose campaigns or jobs because we didn't look quite as slick and professional as these consultants did, yet their credit was nowhere near as good as us. And even worse, we couldn't charge the hourly rates they did. And so again, I believe operational resilience and basic operational infrastructure allows agencies, as they scale up those inflection points, to be to compete within the right space, but importantly, ensure that they are thriving and protecting their bottom line. So, what is this? I talk about 3 basic tech tools for baseline operational resilience. Now, I need to be clear, I'm going to talk about content connectedness in a second, and this was my experience, and this could vary, and there could be 1 or 2 others that I keep out, but this is what changed us from a hardworking, chaotic agency running from one pitch to the next to an agency that was powered by data and the ability to have the right discussions at the right level, and for us to win more pitches and ensure that we were not only paying our bills but making not a healthy profit, but a profit that was as a recognition of the hard work that went in. And the 3 pieces of technology that we implemented: work management, a digital asset management platform, and financial software. Now, I can hear many of you saying, well, of course we have financial software, and we did too. We weren't writing out invoices on an invoice book. But what was interesting is the biggest thing for us is how were they all connected. When I was at Workfront, a work management company that's now with Adobe, I would probably tell you that you needed work management first, digital work management. Now I'm with the DAM. I might be persuaded that the DAM is more important, but all 3 work together to ensure that your agency has a digital framework that allows you to see what's going on. And so work management is not obvious, but for the traffic managers, you'll know this. How do you make sure that you can see where bottlenecks are happening, where bad briefs are coming in, where time is being slipped, how you allocate resources to that. From a financial perspective, we would then allocate the costs of a certain asset to the work management platform. What that did is allowed the account managers to be able to quote without the risk of us going out with a quote that was hugely under where it needed to be. And so we allowed ourselves the ability to scale both invoicing and quoting wise, connected to a kind of framework that ensured that we had guardrails up. And so we created efficiency, effectiveness, and ability to invoice properly without it all having to come back to myself, etc. Where the DAM played such an important role is essentially it connected everything at the bottom. And so when you started creating your briefs, we actually put it in front of the clients to make sure that they updated their latest logos, their brand guidelines. And so we cut out this embarrassment of you would arrive at a pitch and they'll be like, well, that's our logo from last year. We would put that on them with things like portals and dams, etc. And I'm not going to go too deep into that, but the idea of 3 basic technologies that are connected can fundamentally shift your organization into an operation resilient space that allows you to have all the right conversations at all levels of the organization. One anecdote, I remember and this is for the creative team, one of the creative directors came to me saying she was very upset by the fact that they had to log hours, and the logging hours thing is a whole different conversation. And I said, explain to me why. And she said, listen, I feel that we're being watched, and that we should be trusted in the hours we do. And I was like, well, it's interesting. And so change management sits as like a huge thing around all of this. And I said, it's interesting because my intention was not to watch you, was actually to be able to understand how much work you're putting out and how under-resourced you might be, so that I could go to my board and say, hey, here's the data around how much work the creative team is doing, the designers were doing versus the copywriters, and look at the miss on headcount. Now I have a data ability to go and hire people. And that fundamentally changed the discussion around things like tracking hours and things like that. So an anecdotal story around how operational resilience allowed me to do change management, to have mature conversations with my organization, but also with my clients, especially in the world of procurement and retainers. But that's a conversation for another day. And so if we then say, well, okay, great. So that's the world of operational resilience, and 3 basic technologies that can really help you there. What do we look at then when we start saying, how does that fit into the world of actually creating and scaling your creative production? And so I would very crudely break down the process of briefing to outcome into planning, creating, managing, and publishing, whether you're sharing that on social platforms or with your clients. Those would be the 4 areas that we could loosely break things down for the ability of showing that. And within that, you've got great technology on work management, work funds. They're all great. There's some really great technology there. On the creation side, you'll be using all of them, whether it's Canva or Adobe or InDesign, I dare say PowerPoint. Those are all there. Management and things like dams and publishing is fantastic. What we see a lot of, especially in the agency world, is that none of them talk to each other. And so this creates this disconnected tech stack. And so again, I was really good at buying technology. I would go to agency fairs or whatever and get sold to, and my eyes would spin on the excitedness of what it could do for me. But when we took a step back and we said, well, hang on a second, none of these are actually talking to each other. You could build out the most amazing inventories in all 4 of these areas. It's going to not help you to the level you need to reach the operational resilience that I believe modern agencies need. And so what we see a lot of our customers, or we help our customers to get to, is more to get to this world of where everything's connected. And so the planning and processing is delivered through whatever technology. In fact, I can click through the technology that's connected into the world of creation, that's connected to the organizing and searching, that to be like a dam that automatically publishes or shares or allows for self-servicing, where clients can go and get their final artwork, that's plugged into the analytics of the campaign or data usage or image usage, which then allows you to archive and get information and data that should be able to plug back into the planning stage for you to get better and better. What does that mean? It means you can go back to your clients and go, hey, out of interest, data speaking, not subjectivity and emotion speaking, we quoted you 100 hours, it took us 150, and here's why. Here's kind of how the process went, here's the success of the campaign, here's the ability to go and get whatever artwork you wanted from previously. Let's go into the next campaign and do better. That's a better discussion than, wow, we worked really hard, there was version control issues, etc. We went back and forth. Now you can talk about data, you can kind of scale productivity, you can look at where things fell apart or went well, and start to really organize your agency in a world that gives you the power and the information to be able to make the right decisions. I made many bad decisions on gut feel, etc. And then I kind of mentioned already, but for me, the power of data in a connected agency, it cannot be overstated enough. And on the far left-hand side of taking generic pictures, we talk about team scheduling, about the actual workflow management, the insights around where work's going through well, where your roadblocks are and how you can go and fix them. Things like image utilization, how well that's worked on social media platforms, who's downloaded what. Client asks you to get something done, the next day, but they're only downloaded a week later. That allows you to have that insight. Data is at the heart of being able to mature and grow and scale as an agency organization, and have the right conversations at the right time. And so I could go on forever on different solutions and what it is, but if you take one thing away here, is that digital operationalization inside an agency can be as small investments as 3 fundamental pieces of tech. Once you start growing it out, the more connected your tech stack is, the more powerful your operational resilience is going to be. And that can scale based on the size of your agency and as you grow. And so I'm at the 40-minute mark, and I'd like to kind of wrap up with section 3 and then get into the Q&A. Is I have spoken about, the future of AI. And so if you go back to the beginning of the conversation, how do agencies thrive in a world of potential uniformity? AI is such an interesting one for all of us to grapple with. And I think about AI with massive excitement and a little bit of trepidation as well. And why is that? And so I always, when I'm giving presentations on stage, I love this slide. It's a slide that I've been showing for just over a year now. It came from a company called Every Pixel. But essentially, the time it took to reach 15 billion images, AI created in 1.5 years. It took photographers around the world 149 years to do the same thing. So let that sink in. It's also a year ago, so that might be 25 billion by now, who knows, because it's exponential growth. But think about the impact that's had specifically on the creative world, and specifically to content creators and brands who think things can be done at the click of a button. I speak about some of the tools that I'm sure that you're all using: ChatGPT, multiple video platforms, and probably one of the most powerful platforms I've seen is Firefly. I still keep in contact with a lot of my creative agency colleagues and friends back in South Africa. I've got a great story on that we can talk about later, around the power of ChatGPT and also the disempowering fact of ChatGPT. Almost be careful what you wish for. But these are seriously powerful tools that should absolutely be part of your thinking. But let's talk about where that sits within the world of kind of strategy and where my head's at. So the challenges for content scaling is, as we've discussed, you've got time constraints, we've got budget limitations, we've got disconnected technologies, we have siloed teams with fractured communication. And I talk here, not only in the agency space, but fractured communication with your clients, often down to them, not you. And so do we have this kind of knight in shining armor called generative AI that comes in and just solves everything? My feeling, and I'm pretty sure yours as well, is no. My feeling is that AI is not a strategy. I know that sounds rudimentary. A lot of brands feel it is, and we engage a lot of brands who say, well, just AI, we can plug AI in and off we go. But I believe, most importantly, that AI cannot replace great creative concepts and breakthrough campaigns. In fact, this is now even more valuable. And so if I talk about the world of uniformity, I believe, and I'm kind of maybe jumping the gun, is that AI has the most wonderful potential for operational efficiency and to do automated tasks. And you need to bake that into your strategy around where you're taking your tools and where it's going, and be very clear about what AI does and what it doesn't do. But I believe that really great creative is actually now more needed than ever, because of the world of the sea of sameness and the potential that everything starts to look the same. Creative thinking, creative breakthrough campaigns and ideas are never as important than we have right now. And I love this kind of point that creativity is inherently human and therefore cannot be replaced. And so as we wrap up, AI should be part of your strategy, which I mentioned. As I wrap up, here, take a picture of some of this. This is some of the great tools that I believe, from an operational perspective, AI has got incredible power. We use a lot of them ourselves. We engage a lot of them. They have an amazing place to play. We have an incredible AI strategy within DAM. But again, you need to plug it into the strategy rather than it being the strategy itself. And so I've got 2 slides left, and I want to leave you with some of my final thoughts, and then we'll go into Q&A to wrap up. A couple of things. I believe there's an opportunity, and this comes from my thoughts, but also something formulated as I did research for this presentation today, is I think there's an opportunity for agencies to deeply understand the understanding of business and systems thinking within your creative teams. And so I'm not trying to be patronizing here and suggest none of you think about business. Of course you do. but how does that fit into the world of creative teams? And how do you build systems thinking in to a creative process? And I love the creative process because it's often so kind of ubiquitous and difficult to pin down. And creatives will go, you can't put time against a great idea, and I agree with that. But you're still working within a world that requires salaries to be paid, bonuses to get there, etc. And so, how do you blend the two? Obviously, I feel that operational tools help you get there. Agencies don't need to just create, they need to now create solutions that work within the complex world that their clients operate in. And if you can get that right, you become a very valuable and sticky partner to clients for a long term, which means value to you over a longer time. The second one is I believe there's a skills gap and therefore a great opportunity in data storytelling. The ability to translate data insights into actionable and compelling narratives that inspire decision making. And this is twofold. This is the data you get from campaigns. What are people that are interacting with your creative campaigns telling you, and what can you give that back to the organization? But equally, what is your data telling you about how you've shifted the needle for the organization you work with, and how do you allow them to make decisions that'll hopefully enable you to get more campaign budget, etc. And so the idea of understanding data, being able to take data into stories, I think is an incredible opportunity for all of you as the modern agency evolves into the next 10 years. And then lastly, great creative campaigns and work are no longer enough to ensure the success of an agency. And that sounds slightly counterintuitive because I believe that great creative work is needed more now than ever. Yet what you need to be able to do is to have everything I've spoken about is to then be able to have the ability to charge fair value, to protect your bottom line, to reward your staff appropriately, to invest in things like learning and development, and to create time for creativity to thrive in all forms and parts of, in all forms part of the modern agency, to conquer and to be sustainable and successful. And so again, I go into some of the best campaigns we created and some of global behavior change things we did. I don't know if we ever created the time and space to reflect on that, to build on that, and to be truly brilliant going forward. We seem to lurch from one campaign to the next, and I believe it's one of the biggest challenges of many agencies. And so let me leave you with this quote that gives you the feeling of my respect for creative agencies, for the creative world, and what you do is creativity is the power to connect the seemingly unconnected. You do a job that no other organization can do or no other industry can do, and you do it for some of the biggest brands in the world and some of the most important campaigns that this world needs right now. So huge respect on that note. It's a thank you from me, and let's hand it over to Q&A.
Andrew, thanks so much for that. It's always such a delight for me to both learn and observe and have a chance to continually rethink the complexities of how we move and how we manage the sands of digital time. The narrative changes so much, and we focus on it in so many different ways. We had a question come in about the presentation itself, and Rutgers we are recording this. We will edit it, do a little bit of editing to it, and then we will make this available to everyone who attended today, and it'll be up on our Rutgers Continuing and Professional Studies website. Before we start the Q&A, and thank you for that one question, please send some more along. One housekeeping note that I forgot to mention earlier is that we at Rutgers have a program, and in fact, our program lead has joined us today, Claire Carter-Ginn. It's a 12-week professional certificate in advanced creative operations. Part of the heart of what we do at Rutgers is to continually ask what will help the professionals who are working within the areas that Andrew discussed and many others continue to experience satisfaction and grow their careers or enable their careers. So in honor of that, we are going to spin the wheel at the end of this, thanks to the concept we all learned from Wheel of Fortune. And we're going to give away a seat in our forthcoming our Advanced Creative Operations class. So a very nice value and a small way to say thank you for joining us today. Andrew, I had a question that was sent over to me. in thinking about AI and its capacity to fracture logic, which seems unending in some ways, one of the questions, or the question basically was, okay, how do I test this? How do I assert the importance of a laboratory environment to understand what the repercussions of deploying these tools? So I am both doing this ethically and correctly. I also am mitigating against uniformity in an era of AI. But basically it was about, hey, how do I explain the need to test? Because a lot of the technologies we put in place, we don't do that for content technologies.
That's a great question. I've got many thoughts on this. The one is I will empathize with agency leaders in here because the time to test is difficult to build out an agency, but I think it's critical. I wish I did more of it. The other one is there's going to be different risk where you're testing the AI, whether it's an operational side, which is probably less risky, and the creative side, which is highly risky, based on ethics, right usage, etc., and where AI is coming from. But the biggest thing, two things I would say. One is bring your client in, make them part of that process of testing. It does two things. It tells them that you are trialing technology to remain to try and be at the forefront of efficiency and effectiveness, and so you're not resting your laurels, etc. And the other one is you kind of make them complicit in the process of testing, right? And so you can build a strong relationship. You know, in my experience, always with clients, we're always looking for that silver bullet, and it's almost a way for you to kind of shut them down before they come to you and go, oh wow, we're not using ChatGPT to do, you know, why are we charging so much? Because you can just use ChatGPT, etc. Build them into that, you know, build them into your testing environment, make them part of the process, and go, we're trying to make your world better and our world better. Let's do this together. And so, like, that would be my one advice. And the one is, you know, when you do have time to test, I would absolutely do so. And then last one, actually, we created a huge campaign around our investment in technology. AI wasn't utilized back then. I'm not showing my age, but the principle still stands. We actually built a huge campaign around the investment we made on scalability and operational resilience, because it gives the client a sense of comfort that you're investing in not just creativity, but you can scale to their needs. And so we go back to all that content explosion stuff. Clients are going to look for agencies that can keep up with their demands at the same level of quality, etc. So there's a campaign almost built into that to go and pitch for new work.
So I had a nice question come in, Kristen. Thank you for this. I'm going to reverse the polarity on this question a little bit, thanks to what Kristen sent in. And that is, what about clients who push back on AI? Not to let me get ready and help me anticipate objections and overcome them proactively, but have you had clients that have pushed back on AI? And some of your reflections on that. A very interesting question, changing the source a little bit like that.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a bit difficult for me to answer because I'm no longer in the creative world, right? And so I'm going to have to give you my opinion rather than have I had clients. I luckily and unfortunately don't get to work with clients anymore and kind of have those discussions. I suppose one of my thoughts would be, though, that I mean, if they flatly refuse and said just no way, then you can't. But what it does do, it kind of heightens your creative process, right? Again, I'm assuming you're talking about things like Firefly or ChatGPT, where we get into the creative world and there's murky areas around authenticity, etc. Yeah, I mean, what you could do is showcase what you do for other clients. It's use cases and case studies are such a good way of appeasing people. You could also suggest we do a test, an A/B test. And so when you come out to the concept level and you're presenting two concepts, you could say, listen, you know, we won't tell you at the actual pitch state which one was generated by or enhanced or used along with AI, because it should never just be one, you know, just an AI delivery, but one we utilized AI to help us get there, the other we didn't. You pick which one you like best, and then we'll unveil which one it is, and then we can decide whether you still feel the same way or not. Those would be suggestions, but obviously quite clearly I've never been put in a situation in an agency world where a client has asked me not to use AI.
Interesting. I have two questions that have come in that are at least first cousins and or maybe stepbrothers or stepsisters. The first one is, okay, thanks for the advice on getting a laboratory idea set up so I can test this thing. And then the second one that came in kind of related to this was, all right, got that. But this involves me incorporating a lot of people in a conversation who are in the adjacencies of my work, but they are not my work. I have to get legal involved. I might have to get a test environment set up. I might have to have clients involved in this through a portal access that normally they would never get access to. How do I rise to getting to managing across the adjacencies? You know, a great phrase that we all can always learn from. But how do I do that when AI is specifically the trigger and we're worried about ethics, we're worried about digital provenance and other topics like that?
I'm not entirely sure AI is any different to anything else in getting stakeholders involved and engaged, right? There might be different conversations and there might be legal things I'm not aware of, but a great example for me is one of our biggest clients was a very globally large financial services organization, which, like any anything like finance or pharmaceuticals, etc., is a highly governed industry. And so we used to have to go through a lot of hoops around getting legal and compliance sign off. And the biggest thing, so my answer to your question is, the biggest thing is try and get to the source of the individual who's making decisions on your behalf or that could impact your creative delivery. And so an anecdotal story was, you know, we kept on launching new products, but we would be redlined with our creative thinking. And our feeling was it diluted the final product, which we were getting measured against, and ultimately would inhibit our longer term growth inside the organization. And so I actually took it upon myself to go and meet with the head of legal for this organization up on the top floor of the massive skyscraper they had, and knocked on his door and said, like, I just need to get your opinion of why we're getting redlined and kind of get context to it. And that fundamentally changed the way we did our delivery. It created a great relationship, and it speeded up or took away a lot of the barriers, and it gave us one of the biggest advantages against any of our competitors. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but my advice would be go and meet the blockers or stakeholders at face value, have that conversation with them rather than through a third party or your client in the brand, and use that information to make you better, whether it's a discussion on AI or anything else. You know, those relationships for me inside the agency were massive differentiators for us.
Yeah, what a nice thematic kind of getting middle C to get the orchestra tuned to engage and befriend. So the kinship question to this also involves adjacencies, reporting lines, some of the fractures that can occur along the evolution of organization, either capability or maturity. And I use those words differently, very deliberately. And Amy, thank you for this question. My struggle has been helping people at my agency understand why these tech stacks are not an IT responsibility, but rather an operational responsibilities, because they are tied to workflow while needing common data infrastructure for interchange underneath them. So a classic evolving landscape and a very challenging one, depending on IT's roles, attitudes, and frameworks for approaching, engaging, and befriending, and why it's so joined to that prior question.
So can I understand the question properly? Is it, how do you navigate the IT challenge when IT don't understand the operational benefits of having that technology? Would that be a good framing of the question?
Generally, I'll say my struggle has been helping people at my agency understand why these tech stacks are not an IT responsibility. And Amy said, yes, that's exactly the
Okay, great, cool.
Yeah.
I meant to actually ask if there was IT in the room when we started off, because I've formed a wonderful bond with IT over the years. But Amy, I had exactly these challenges, right? There's a couple of strategies here. One is you should lean on your vendors to help you and give you good use cases of the benefit of these technologies, so you can showcase that to the executive that can then almost kind of, so you go top down, And so that you kind of then showcased, this is the outcomes of human behavior and the benefits to the organization operationally when we implement these. They should, of course, tick all the right IT boxes. And so a lot of that will be, and a lot of what IT ends up governing is it an open architecture, i.e. we're not going to buy this and it's going to create a silo. If that's the case, I generally would lean towards IT to go, I agree with you. And then the other one is I would pull in kind of like again, the business benefits, the bottom line benefits, a lot of what challenges agencies are effectiveness and efficiency. These are words I would use when you talk about the tools you're using, right? It enables us to be a better organization, to create better campaigns, to hire less people or whatever, and therefore it's operational, not an IT thing. Having said that, like the right IT people are good. And generally what I've seen on IT is that it builds your tech stack. It doesn't create data silos. So yeah, and one thing I meant to say is if anyone ever wants to connect with me on LinkedIn or whatever, please do. I can speak about agencies for days. I absolutely love it. And so if you want to ask me any questions beyond that, I'm very happy to engage on that with more context.
Amy, another comment that I would make in my observation of engage and befriend. Some of you on the call may know that I occupy a central role in the use of capability models, what we used to call maturity models, that follow the Carnegie Mellon teachings from the Software Enterprise Institute about benchmarking tools. And as we developed the first digital asset management capability model in 2012, and we now have 13 years of experience under our belts with that, and we have a capability model that'll be publicly released very soon that my colleague Claire Carter-Ginn, who's on the call, has helped to lead as a global subject matter expert on creative operations. And I have found with these benchmarking tools, to my utter surprise, like David, you should have figured this out, many, many, many IT professionals have used benchmarking tools for a really long time. And in convening the kind of community together, an internal organizational development workshop that using a capability model represents, and inviting IT to them time after time, those of us who facilitate these workshops have seen someone from IT raise their hand, go, oh, well, I know what a capability model is. Of course we use these. And it's a common benchmarking tool. Their roles and intentions might seem initially a little ambiguated when we're talking about creative operations or digital asset management and other CDPs and other more content-centric technologies, but they all stem from the same basic design from the Carnegie Mellon Capability Model Maturity Institute that we follow in creating these. So that's in the spirit of, we want to be talking to the people who influence budget, power, authority, staffing, conviviality as often and as widely as we can. And benchmarking tools might offer a very unexpected ally in this journey. An interesting question to follow this: how can young professionals in small agencies differentiate themselves and break into the competitive consulting space?
Yeah, I luckily pre-read this, and so I'm smiling because I love this question. It takes me back to a young 24-year-old who was massively threatened by one of the big four agencies and a consultancy in financial services, which is quite an intimidating space. There's two answers to this. One is to the young professional, you need to be better than the other individual in the room. And what does that mean? It means being hugely curious and specializing in one of the verticals you work in. And so if it's FMCG or brand or financial services like me or something a bit more exciting, make sure that you're hungry for knowledge. And the reason why you do that is when you end up in a room with older professionals and you're able to keep pace with that conversation and add interesting nuggets and insights, it turns heads. And so I used to make all of my young account managers read newspapers every day, a little bit old school, but it enabled them to be current and to be able to have conversations with people slightly older than them and to kind of land that level of knowledge, etc. What you'll find interesting, and the biggest frustration I used to have being a smaller agency in the beginning, is we used to talk about A, B, and C teams, and we used to always put our A team out, right? And you would have consultancies that, maybe at the very beginning put out their top hitters, but once the project got going, you used to have their B's and C's. You generally would know nothing about the organization and industry that they're engaging with, yet they've got the job. And so on the one side, young professionals in agency be very hungry for knowledge, for historic knowledge, for specific industry knowledge, but also current knowledge. It'll make you differentiate yourself from pretty much everyone. And then on the operational side, there's so many lovely small tricks not tricks, small strategies, tactics that allow an agency to punch well above their weight, even when you're 500 and you're up against some of the big McKinseys of the world. Things like, and I don't want to get too salesy here on a dam, but things like having portals that can be branded within the look and feel of your customer that you're pitching with inside branded environments, that you're not sending WeTransfers and Dropbox links. That type of thing differentiates you from a consultancy and a big agency. The other one is you've got to have those financial software tools to be able to create proper broken down quotes that actually don't just say campaign equals X amount of $1,000. There's a breakdown, there's information, etc. Those things make a very big difference. And then ensuring things like you have branded templates, you have all that type of stuff, right? All of the peripheral stuff that makes the big agencies and the consultants look good, and look beyond. I mean, we're talking agencies, right? A lot of it's about packaging.
Andrew, we've had a lot of conversation about talent retention, about skills development. Your guidance into the Rutgers program has been quite valuable. I'd like to ask Julie to come on camera about this question about how can young professionals in small agencies differentiate themselves and break into the competitive consulting space. I think I believe this. I've devoted 6 years to working on the Rutgers program, and work with Julie on the critical nature of professional development, poise, lifelong learning that I think affirms part of the answer to this. And Julie, I thought it'd be fun to have you answer part of this question. And you need to unmute. There we go.
Okay, so one of the things that I would say is you need a network. You need people in your life who are 3 steps down the road from where you want to go. And then you need to have people in your life who you can call on and think things through. One of the things that we are very intentional about at Rutgers is creating programs that build that network into our course development, because when you come to Rutgers, you are Rutgers and your community is here, and community not only through our cohorts where you're walking through this certificate program for 12 weeks, for instance, with creative operations, but you have the network that comes along with it well after the course is over. So we try and not only celebrate the learning that's happening currently, but also months, sometimes years down the road. And I think that sometimes we think we have to do everything alone, and we don't. We can create friend groups who will push you, who will get you outside of your bubble, who will get you to understand, to look at things in new ways. I would also say that there are times when attending conferences like Henry Stewart is a great opportunity for you to push yourself, and you really need to say, where am I in my professional journey and what do I need right now? And sometimes that will be a great conference. Sometimes it will be a conversation like this afternoon. Sometimes it will be a certificate. Sometimes it will be something deeper, but you got to build your network.
Great, thanks. Another approach to this that I've seen and found interesting is to set forth the question about what can create team building within a current employment situation. And one of the most fascinating answers I got to this one time was the DAM team, to do professional development, decided to go do volunteer DAM work through the Office of Corporate Social Responsibilities. And it kind of forced them to do inside-outside thinking. And they worked with, it was a small environmental group or a community educational outreach center, something like that. But to kind of get out of the office And this could be collaboratively, it could be just a damn team if it was big enough, or creative ops team. But it was a way to do volunteer work to get out in the community and then reflect on, hey, what is it that we're pretty good at? Kind of an interesting, it was really fun to see. Okay, Andrew. So we've had that part of the telescope was kind of looking down at a professional joining or maturing into our field and looking ahead. Now let's turn that telescope around and look out at the big picture. Many of these technologies originate out of the office of the chief marketing officer and grow and prosper in a creative suite, in asset liquidity, in the creative operations platform, if we see connectivity all the way from storyboarding to archiving. So, well, one thing that we often observe is the logic of that initial reporting role and budgetary role to the CMO can decay or fracture over time. It's like, well, wait a minute. Yeah, I'd love creative operations and my team does this. I pay for this, but I've got these people knocking on my door saying they want to use the creative platform we've designed for customer service or for the archive or for visitor services. I even had one person come up and they wanted to do buildings and grounds using the technology that we've invested in for emergency evacuation procedures. And they needed this tool set. So reflect for us, if you will, a little bit on what happens up in more sweet seed level when there's a need for changing the reporting line.
I think it's interesting. You know, when agencies will generally win a pitch and land a new client and win some work, and either they get a retainer or they do such great work they get more work, and that leads to more and more work, right? At the very beginning, the CMO is going to be hugely influential and very involved. And as that trust grows, and as they get more comfortable that the agency is on board, so that relationship is going to become further and further away, which is wonderful in many ways and dangerous in others, because that was the person who first got you in, right? What digital operational tools, like we discussed, give you the benefit of is a number of things. One is it retains the relationship with the CMO. It's just shifted in what you're giving them. And so the CMO is now looking for data on efficiency and effectiveness. Why? Because generally the board goes, are we getting enough out of our agencies? And if you're the agency that can show through data what you've delivered, the effectiveness, the return on investment, which is all at the CMO's fingertips, you become hugely valuable. So that's one side. The other one's interesting is you spoke about peripheral stuff. So often success brings success, and that can be amazing, but it can trip you up. And so I used to fear the call on a Friday afternoon from a client that said, "Hey, Andrew, you know, there's a department on floor 5 that saw some of the campaign work we did 2 years ago, and they want it because they want to work with you. Can you go and get me the content?" And that sounds like a really easy thing to do, right? It would literally create panic and chaos in our studio for at least 4 hours, where at least 4 hours, like half a day, us going to try and find things. And so the ability to have an infrastructure that allows for self-service, where that conversation would be absolutely, David, you can, but it's in your portal. Go look for it, give them a link, tell them here's whatever it is, they can go and have access, they can find it easily, etc. Going back to like how you look professional, etc. That is such a efficient and effective way to engage with other stakeholders, rather than tripping up your creative billable resources looking for content that you never knew was there, right? And the traffic managers listening in, should be rolling their eyes on those type of comments, because they sound so inane. Or the CMO's gone, "You've got to speak to my agency, they're so awesome, ask them for this campaign." They don't potentially realize the chaos that creates, but it shouldn't. And so if you have an infrastructure that allows for self-service, that allows for easy finding, you know, again, you can scale through the organization quite comfortably. And people walk around and go, "Man, I engaged with my organization, used to be called the Hero Group. What an awesome platform they had. I went in there as a new user, found all the campaigns we used to do. I've downloaded them, I've used them. They've all got watermarks on whatever restrictions they have, but I got it within the click of a button." And so, you know, think about the reverse when someone goes, "Oh, well, I engaged with your agency. That didn't seem that great." I mean, you know, and that's the interesting kind of thing. So the relationship with the CMO evolves and changes. It can be very fruitful, but it's also a dangerous pathway to navigate as well.
And I think we all benefit from increased awareness of how vital the MarTech stack is these days. It's been so rewarding to see the Association of National Advertisers, ANA, they're having their annual conference in Austin this week, have intentional conferences designed around MarTech. And I think it's helping to escalate this conversation to more of a platform level. And also because of the attendees at ANA, all of us working in these allied and adjacent fields have another environment to continue these conversations at a more connected and larger enterprise level, which has been quite fun to see. So Andrew, I always like, as we're winding up this a little bit, but we do have our drawing coming up, to think about, okay, it's March, but it's 2026. Another year has gone by. And what are a couple of things as you look out and do a bit of up periscope over the event horizon that you might like to think of yourself as working on as we look at the connected agencies, at its meanings, at protocols to give us productive use of the ambiguated AI landscape? If we were to have a chance to be talking in March of 2026, a couple of things that you might expect to have as part of that conversation.
That's a difficult question, David. Let me do some jazz hands like I'm back in the agency world. Difficult conversations in front of clients. On a professional level and a Canto level, we have a vision. I certainly have a vision, and I've got the backing of my board to be the dam built for agencies. That would make me, nothing prouder. And there's like little things we can tweak along that journey of product development to get there. The more we engage with agencies, the more knowledge we get and build on. And so I'm loving that journey around what we can do to help agencies protect their creative delivery and bottom line. So that would be on a creative level. I'm interested to see where AI is going to take us, both in how it's built into technology, like our own stack, but also how it's built into other technology and how that's going to connect everything. I'm a really big believer in connectedness and tools talking to each other, and this idea of like really showing the benefit and return on investment on investing in the right technology stack. So that's another thing that I'm excited to see where that goes. I think AI can help with a lot of connectedness. And then the other one is, back in the creative world, I'm excited to see where thorough creative thinking campaigns are going to drive narratives globally to the benefit of mankind, in my view, whatever that might look like. I believe in times of global stress, and I think we're seeing some of it right now. I think creativity and change campaigns are more critical than ever, and I'm excited to see what the pressure cooker delivers, because pressure delivers some very interesting results. And so I'd love to look back on March 2026 and go look at some of the most amazing campaigns that were created and how it changed opinions and shifted countries, organizations, and mindsets.
Nice. I think there's a couple of technology trends or trends in content adjudication I might add to that. Along with that would be, I'd like us to be having more conversations about the value of content. I think this still remains a hidden shadow in managing these shifting sands of digital, about the investment that's made, whether it's an image that ends up on a brand label, whether it's a video that has a more transient life arc to it. What are the costs involved in producing that? What are the economic models of valuing that? Can I isolate metadata separately from this binary object creation so I get a lot more reuse out of the metadata, and it's the luminosity to search and discovery that brings? And I'd like to see continuing and expanding a conversation about that, and also for all of us who are talking today and talking in general about these issues, in the economic value of the net result in a repository. So if there's mergers and acquisitions, if there's a deaccession action, that we say, hey, we've got these well-formed creative assets that are connected among and between themselves, and their digital assets, boy, are they worth something, and have that be part of this. I'd like to see in March of 26 that would be part of a conversation that, and what that does in my mind is continue to buttress the enterprise nature of these conversations, and that workflows are workflows, and data has an ever and connectedness. To go to your core theme, connectedness helps us to isolate. Look, workflows are just workflows, but the connectedness gives us depth of meaning and different resilience.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation I've had many times. That's a great point, and yes, I agree.
Well, as promised, Julie, I'm going to ask you to come back on camera and talk a little bit about what we are doing here today. And I think we have had to recuse Amy from this wheel spinning, since she is the program lead on it. Sorry, Amy, we apologize. You can get an extra Rutgers magnet or something. So Julie, over to you.
So we are going to spin the wheel, and one of our participants this afternoon is going to come and join our spring.
Great.
Thank Andrew and David for such an insightful afternoon. I know David has a couple final words for us, but thank you, Andrew, for just a very inspiring, thought-provoking conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Julie. It was great.
We appreciate those of you who've had the opportunity to share some time with us today. The dialogue and community that gets created through events like this, through the very engaging approach that we have to teaching these skills at Rutgers, continues to, we believe, refine careers and enable opportunities. I hope that we'll see you all again, either on our forthcoming colloquia within the Rutgers program, and as all of us travel here and there and attend conferences, that we have the chance to continue to create community and affirm career and success. This concludes the webinar. Thank you for joining us.